In this video, we're going to be talking about one-step equations. Now, ever since you guys were in elementary school, probably, you guys have been doing these, you just don't know it. What they did was they would put a box and say, okay, something plus 3 is going to be equal to 5. Well, because these are simple numbers, you can just automatically see that, oh, 2 plus 3 is equal to 5. Now, what we've done is we've made it a little bit more complicated by saying, okay, our unknown is no longer a box, it's a variable. So this is what we're looking for. A number plus 3 is equal to 5. And so this is still the same thing though, right? You can automatically see that 2 is gonna be what x is. So x will be equal to 2. Now, it's not always going to be so easy to see. Sometimes it'll end up as a fraction, sometimes there's multiple steps. In this case, we're only starting with one step. So there has to be an order to how we find this unknown. And how we do that is by undoing what's happening with it. So we will undo a plus 3 by subtracting 3. And we have to keep it equal. This right here means it's gotta stay equal. So you can't just take away from one side and not take away from the other. If we take away from this side, you have to take away from this side. Doing the same thing to both sides is what keeps an equation equal. And then undoing this opposite. So by subtracting a positive 3, it goes to 0, it's gone, and we only have x left on this side. Now, what we do over here is 5 minus 3, and that gives us 2. So our unknown value was 2. It's not always going to be this easy. That's why I'm showing you these steps, okay? So let's try another couple of them. Let's say it's like x minus 8 is equal to 72. Well, my variable's right here. It's currently subtracting 8. So in order for me to get rid of subtracting 8, I have to do the opposite. So I say, okay, plus 8. Because I added 8 on this side, I have to add 8 on this side to keep my equation equal. That is at 0. I still have my x on that side. 72 plus 8 is equal to 80. And something that you guys can do, I don't think you ever will, you can even check it. 80 minus 8 does equal 72. Just like we checked this one up here. 2 plus 3 does equal 5. So this is the idea of adding, right? And we subtract to get rid of it. This is subtraction and we add to get rid of it. You can do the same thing with multiplying and dividing. So if I have something like 7x equals 14, to undo multiplication, because remember, when two things touch, multiplication is happening. To undo multiplication, we have to divide by that number. Don't divide by your variable as well. It would move your variable and we don't want to. Just divide by that number. What that does is 7 divided by 7 gives us 1x. We now have 1x. We'll just write it like x. And because we divided this side by 7, we have to divide this side by 7 to keep my equation equal. And 14 divided by 7 is 2. When you see an equation like this, you'll notice that your variable is already being divided. So opposite of divide is to multiply. And I want to show you guys something. So really what's happening is we have two fractions here. We have 3 over 1, and then we have 1 over 3. Whenever you multiply fractions, it's just straight across the top and straight across the bottom. So what you really get is 3x, because 3 times 1, over 1 times 3, which is 3. So when I put my parentheses up here like this, and I do times by 3, and then I really just cross it out like that, this is really what's happening, and it creates that 1 again. Just like it did up here when we divided, when we multiply, it does the same thing. It creates that 1, so we just have an x. And then over here, we have to do the same thing to keep it equal. We times it by 3. 12 times 3 is 36. And then if I check it, 36 divided by 3, hey, that equals 12. That's what I I should have gotten. So we're good. Let me show you a couple of tricks that might come your way. These are really just positive numbers with the exception of our -8, but I'll show you one that has to do with some negatives, okay? So even if it says like -2 plus x is equal to a -14, this right here is a positive variable. So we need that positive variable. This is actually what's happening to it. And I could really rewrite it. Remember, we can change the order of it as long as we don't change the value. So I can change this order of x to -2 because my value is still that -2. Do you see that? Is equal to -14. But you're not going to want to do that for all of them. So you want to be able to see that this is your variable. You have to get rid of a -2. How do you get rid of a -2? By adding 2. So you get rid of that one, and what you are left with is just a positive x. I no longer need my positive sign. So because I've added 2 on this side of the equal sign, I have to add 2 over here. And then I just do what the numbers tell me to do. -14 plus 2 is a -12. Totally okay. Now, when we have a -3 timesing our variable and it equals a 9, what we want to do is we want to do the opposite of what is happening to our variable. So we want to do the opposite of this, not this opposite, okay? So we will divide by a -3. You can't change two things at one time. You would change multiplication to divide, and then you would change subtraction to add, and you can't do that. One thing at a time. So a negative divided by a negative is a positive, and we need that to be 1 again. So over here, we would also divide by a -3. X is equal to now 9, positive 9 divided by -3 will give me a negative. If I plug that back into my original equation, which was -3 times, now this is my x. A negative times a negative is that positive. So watch those signs, okay? You have to be able to understand why you're taking it or why you're not taking it, okay? I'll show you what I mean over here as well. So -3x is equal to a -9. Now, when I divide by a -3, because this needs to work out to be a +1, over here I would also divide by a -3. That gives me a +3. If I go back up here and I plug it into my original equation, a negative times a positive is a negative. So as long as you keep those signs together, they will work out in the end. I'll show you one more when we're dividing. So x over -2 is equal to 6. I'm doing the opposite of divide. So I am timesing by a -2. So over here I need to times by a -2. Those become a 1, and I have just x is equal to a positive times a negative is a negative. 6 times 2 is 12. So now if I have a -6, when I multiply it by a -2, that becomes my 1x. And I multiply this by a -2. Sorry, it kind of looks like a exponent right there. Really, it's supposed to be multiplying. Negative times negative is a positive. 6 times 2 is 12. If I went and checked that, 12 divided by a -2 is going to equal that -6. So just watch those signs, make sure you know why you're moving them, if you're moving them, and then you should be good to go.